We're back to KJ and Lions on WEEI.
Yeah. KJ and Lions, WEEI. Thank you so much for starting your Sunday with us. 617-779-7937. Text line 37937. Still to come, the Lions Den. That's in 20 minutes. Plus, we'll talk to Tommy Freezepops Caroll down at Patriots practice. Mayo's getting ready for his presser today at 10. We'll talk to him in a couple of minutes. John, we were just talking about Brandon Ayuk saying no to the team and the Ridley situation and why are these guys saying that. So if I move the ball forward, I'll give you names and you got to pick one. I want to see if we're on the same page. These are free agents available at the end of this year. I'm going to give you a name. You tell me which one you would take.
Sounds good.
Amari Cooper, Chris Godwin.
Yeah.
Stephon Diggs.
Yes.
T. Higgins.
Yes.
CeeDee Lamb.
Yes.
Now, who do you think is the one most likely the Patriots would get after you've seen what's just occurred with Ayuk and with Ridley and with, even to a lesser degree,
most likely is Cooper. Probably of those names. I'd love Godwin. And a name to watch, we can get into this later. I know we got Tom Caroll coming up. DK Metcalf, KJ. Keep your eye on him. He's got 2 years left on his deal. They drafted Jackson Smith and Jigba last year.
Wait. This is what I'm saying. Can't we just go with these guys are free agents?
I'm just saying.
You will be in the equal pool when you start talking about guys like.
Keep your eye on him.
They have X amount of years left on their deal. That means there's a trade that has to happen. Yep. We've seen what's happened with trades. They haven't happened.
Keep your eye on him. That's all I'm saying. I would love T. Higgins or Lamb. I just think of the list you said. Cooper's the most likely, followed probably by Godwin.
Well, I think Cooper's the most likely because you figure on his next deal, it won't be maxed as these other guys are getting now. Him and Alex Van Pelt were together in Cleveland. And if you're talking about dealing with a new quarterback, how many quarterbacks did they rotate with last year? It wasn't Joe
Cleveland
Flacco.
Had 5.
Yeah, Joe Flacco was their quarterback so you can't say, hey, I haven't been in a situation where we're trying to figure out who the quarterback is. So I think you don't even have to make the trade for Amari Cooper. I think you just play everything out this year, see what the young receivers do, get Amari Cooper next year, and then roll with that, and maybe someone you could pick up in the draft, because at the end of the day, it still comes back down to the O-line, does it not?
I think that's the reason Drake Maye didn't play as much the other night. I think that's the biggest thing they still have to fix on the team going into next year. Yeah, that's still the biggest thing.
Hey, later in the show, I'll tell you about how I was impressed with Mac Jones last night against Kansas City. But right now, coming in, one of our newest members of the WEEI team. He goes by Freezepops, but let me tell you, his takes are hot, baby. Tom Caroll, a.k.a. Tommy Freezepops. Welcome to KJ and Lions. Man, good Sunday to you.
Yeah, I like that intro there. Hot takes. Here we go.
This is sports entertainment galore. I don't know what happens during the rest of the week, but during this time, you get sports entertainment. So let's just jump right into it. And John had just mentioned this. What is we think it's because of the offensive line, right? But Drake Maye playing, 5 plays, 6 plays? Did that seem like a absurdly low number?
Yeah, it was crazy. I mean, everyone in the press box kind of groaned like, oh, really? Is this guy done for the night? I think it was 7 snaps, 6 total plays, because there was an offensive line pre-snap penalty, of course, in the mix there. So it was a waste. I mean, you have this young guy, and you're going up against the Panthers team who's telling you from the jump, hey, we're going out there with our 3rd and 4th stringers. Let him go out there and get some reps. These games don't come around all that often, right? You got the Eagles game this upcoming Thursday, and then preseason game 3 has become what preseason game 4 was, where no one plays. So you're limiting yourself to 1 week of live full-speed game action against another NFL team for your rookie quarterback to get reps against. And to waste those reps on Bailey Zappi for, the conspiracy theories are out there as to why, it just felt like a wasted opportunity, and it was disappointing.
Tom, I want to kind of zoom out from that and ask you a question about Jerod Mayo, because he was obviously the leader in the decision to only play Drake Maye for the 7 snaps, 6 plays. What did you make of the overall operation of things? Right, this was his first game as head coach. He had the big decision to make with Drake Maye. Do you feel like it was a good night, bad night for a Jerod Mayo? Where do you come down on that?
I mean, I guess it was fine. I mean, preseason football you're not going to learn too much, right? I really want to see Gerard in a high-pressure situation where he has to make a tough decision in a game of consequence. Like, this was kind of a blowout-ish game, even though, it wasn't high-scoring per se, but the Panthers are arguably the worst team in the NFL, and they were giving you their third and fourth stringers. So they weren't able to really do anything. So the Patriots defense looked really good. The offense looked good once they got Milton out there. And I guess it was fine for Mayo. He didn't do anything that looked terrible, right? I guess I would ding him on the fact that we didn't get enough Drake Maye. So let's give him a solid B-, but what does that really mean given the fact that it was just preseason game one against a bad team?
Yeah, Tommy, that's kind of hard for me to give. I think I might have to start a feature on here called Pass the Plate on Sundays just to preach the word of protecting Mayo. I don't know how you give him a B- when I think, and John just mentioned this, is you just mentioned this, like you don't really see too much in preseason, so you have to kind of read between the tea leaves. So it made sense for me that that Bailey Zappi played a lot because I think he needs to be featured a lot if he's going to be dealt somewhere. And I think that's the reason why you saw an extended Bailey Zappi out there. Do you believe that the reason why Zappi was out there for extended minutes is for other teams to get extended looks?
That makes the most sense, but even that logic doesn't really fly with me because you have plenty of game tape on Bailey Zappi at this point, and you have the Steelers win down in Pittsburgh where he looked great. So isn't that enough for teams to look at and say, okay, we know what Bailey Zappi is. We know what he can do in this league. That's the tape. I don't see why you need to have preseason tape on Bailey Zappi playing against the Carolina Panthers third and fourth stringers to get this guy to be traded or moved or what have you. I'm not even sure how much value Bailey Zappi has. Like, what are you getting back in return for Bailey Zappi, a sixth or a seventh? I mean, Justin Fields got moved for, I believe, a sixth to the Steelers. So are you saying that Bailey Zappi is worth as much as Justin Fields, who is going to quite possibly be the starter down in Pittsburgh? That's what it sounds like camp is going like down there. Him and Russell Wilson are having a legit QB competition. So I don't think Bailey Zappi gets that type of trade demand. So I don't know, man. It was confusing, really confusing. I know they're trying to treat Drake Maye with kid gloves, and they want to be extra cautious. They didn't want him out there with the second offensive line. I get it. Leave your first unit offensive line out there longer if you're really worried about that. Also, your second unit of offensive linemen has plenty of NFL experience. The guy's not going to get destroyed out there, especially when they're going up against a Panthers defensive front that is depleted from talent with their starters out there, let alone their backups. So you could tell I'm fired up about this. And for a preseason game, I had some real feelings coming out of it. I wanted to see more Drake Maye. I think it was a really big wasted opportunity.
Oh, boy.
Yeah, and I think the Zappi time was more about even the guys around him than it was so much him as far as evaluation goes. But I want to ask you, Tom, you mentioned the offensive line. There's some young pieces there. There's also some young receivers. When you look at some of the pieces that the Patriots brought in this offseason, whether it's those young O-linemen, those young receivers, what did you make of them? Do you feel like maybe they have some things to develop there at receiver? Are you concerned with the offensive line as I am? And where are you at with some of the non-quarterback pieces we saw the other night?
I mean, you can't not be concerned with the offensive line given what we have at left and right tackle at the moment, which is, a blank spot at both spots. We don't know who's going to start at either position come week one. And the guys they have in the mix for those spots haven't been successful pros. They've had a lot of issues. So if they can make a move that can bolster the tackle spot this month ahead of week one, I'm still in favor of that. I don't think it's likely. Usually if you're getting a guy this time of year on the offensive line, they're not a game-changing type offensive lineman. So that has to be concern number 1, 2, and 3 at the moment. So that's on its own. When it comes to the receivers, I feel actually surprisingly good about where they're at with their young guys. Baker and Polk have looked really good this camp. I think Rager has looked really good. I think Booty had a nice night the other night. They have some good young talent. Now, would that preclude me from wanting to bring in a Brandon Ayuk or, CeeDee Lamb is making noise down in Dallas? Of course not. Of course I'd take those guys, especially if the price is right. But what you have in place with the young receivers here, I think you actually, for the first time in a very long time, can feel good about where this can go. Now, it remains to be seen if they're going to live up to the hype, but from what we've seen a few weeks into camp and then what we saw the other night, I think there's something there.
Tom Caroll, Tommy Freezepops here on WEEI, part of our WEEI.com family. Tom, so obviously the most exciting portion of preseason, game one, was Joe We talk about this. We talk about this offensive line and how it doesn't get together. And you're right. If there was such a great offensive tackle out there that was readily available now, he should already be here. And I don't know how they don't grow on trees. So if you've got a potential situation with a Jacoby Brissett out there who's getting absolutely hammered by a decimated line, do you put Drake Maye out there, or do you start running a more mobile offense until you can fix that line potentially with Joe Milton in pieces?
Man, I just don't think that you can put a ton of stock into what we saw from Joe Milton the other night and keep him in the plans for what the, offense is going to look like during the regular season because of who he was playing against. Like,
if you have an offensive line that cannot protect, what happens to the quarterback? He stands up or does he fall down?
Of course he's going to be on his back, right? But look, Joe Milton looked awesome, but we've seen the fool's gold of preseason every year almost, right? I mean, I remember when Jacoby Brissett had like 5 touchdown passes in a preseason game and they traded him the next day.
Tom, I'm talking about getting away from danger, right? If you put Drake Maye back there, you're talking about potentially putting your franchise into the ground, and you don't want to do that. Jacoby Brissett has taken hits over the years, and how many more hits can he take? Do you potentially look at saying we may need to keep a mobile quarterback on this roster just to keep people protected?
Oh, look, of course, he's going to make the roster. I think that goes without saying. They don't draft him where they drafted him and give him the reps they've given him so far if they don't think he's going to be here, at least in the short term. But when it comes to playing week one, I think that we just need to – I feel like I need to just say this publicly. Like, Joe Milton is not going to be the starter of this team week one. That's just not going to happen. I don't think that he is going to be a guy that's going to be in the mix for playing time unless something unforeseen happens here. He's a fun story. It was fun the other night. And, look, maybe something happens over these next few weeks that proves me wrong here, but – I just don't see him as a guy that is going to be, in the mix here, come week one.
Tom, we've talked a lot about the players on offense so far, but Alex Van Pelt is first year in New England, first full season calling plays for an offense. What did you make of him on Thursday night against Carolina? Do you think he had a good night his first time out? You think he's got a lot to work on? Where's he at?
It's going to be kind of annoying that I'm continuing to hammer this point, but the only thing I can really focus on, given what Gerard told us in the postgame, is the fact that AVP seemingly was the guy that was pushing hard for Drake Maye to not get the reps that he should have gotten on Thursday night. So, of course, they won the game, and there were points throughout the game where the offense looked like it was moving the ball well, but the main thing I wanted to see from the offense was Drake Maye getting reps. And AVP seemingly has Drake Maye on this strict development plan, and they said, we're going to stick to the plan. Everything's planned out. We knew going into the game he was only going to get one series. I just don't agree with that plan. I don't think it's the best development plan. So what those reasons are for why that is the plan for Drake are beyond me. So again, it's hard for me to look past that, given that it is a preseason game, right? So you're only going to learn so much. So what I wanted to see was the young guy get reps. And so that's the thing I'm going to ding him on the most is the operations side of it for AVP was get Drake Maye in the game more, and that didn't happen.
All right, Tom, before you go, best frozen fruit dessert. Best frozen fruit dessert.
Okay. Best frozen fruit dessert.
It could be in a pop. It could be fruit itself.
Sure. I mean, can I go with like a banana split, or does that count?
That's not a frozen. That's not a
big old banana right in the middle of some ice cream. Give me that.
Oh my goodness, that's two snacks there. Yeah. Tommy Freezepops, WEEI.com. Tom Caroll, thanks for your work, and we will talk to you again here soon on KJ and Lions.
All right, thanks, guys.
All right, yeah, you can't cheat when you say banana split like that. Like you go with like frozen watermelon or frozen grapes. But look, John, the point I was getting at was the foreseeable future is this offensive line is not going to get better. Am I crazy to say that?
Yeah, I don't think they're. I mean, they can do some tweaking here and there, but I don't think it's going to get demonstrably better.
Okay,
than what
right.
We saw.
So while you're doing that,
it'll get a little better, but not.
While that tweaking is happening, you know what happens? Rushers get through the line, and you don't want to wish any harm on anybody. But if Jacoby Brissett takes the wrong hit, or an ankle becomes too swollen to be able to operate. Now you're not going to rush Drake Maye into that situation?
Well,
or do you say Joe Milton at least gives you some flexibility to keep the play call simple, know that there's going to flexibility, you have to prepare for the run. And look, nothing was going deep over the last 3 years anyway, so you might as well work with what you have, at least in terms of mobility.
So I think you got the right idea, but you got the wrong guy there, KJ. Because to me, I think the guy you got to look at if you get into that area of concern, it's not Joe Milton, it's Bailey Zappi. I think Zappi's future here is tied directly to Drake Maye's development because, to your point, if they get into a situation where, God forbid, Jacoby Brissett gets hurt in week 2, if they feel like Drake Maye is ready to go and he can step in there and he can survive and be okay, he'll be the number 2 QB on the depth chart and he'll go in there and he'll play. But if they don't think Maye is there yet, and we only saw the one series the other night, then I think Zappi will be here, and Zappi will be that guy to step in. I don't think it'll be Joe Milton. I think it'll be Zappi just because he has a track record of at least starting games in the NFL. For all the criticisms we have of him, he at least has that track record. So I think you have the right idea. I just think you got the wrong guy that's going to be their answer to the question.
So you remember last year where it was kind of like, okay, who was going to – it was like, which quarterback's going to the practice squad? That was last year. I watched that Chiefs-Jacksonville game last night, and this has absolutely nothing to do with Mac Jones. This has to do with Carson Wentz, the backup. He's the number 2 backup to Patrick Mahomes out there, and he looked horrible. And I wondered, when I thought, I was just like, what if the Chiefs said, you know what, we don't want a Carson Wentz here. What if we got someone like a Bailey Zappi who knows what it's like to get in there when there's a fire, and it isn't going to cost us a whole lot? If you're the Patriots, do you take that phone call and say, no, we don't want to trade Bailey Zappi?
Again, I think it comes down to how they feel about Maye. I think if they feel like Maye can step in there in week 2 or week 3 if Brissett gets hurt, then, yeah, you take that phone call and you make the deal. Otherwise, you don't. And again, a lot of it is Maye's development, but then the offensive line point's a big thing, right? Like that first-team offensive line played 2 series the other night. Then Vidarian Lowe at left tackle, they're so thin there, he had to go out and play with the second unit O-line for a while at left tackle. Like, that's how thin they are there. And, hey, like, Layden Robinson looked okay at guard in some of his action, obviously, with the second team, but that's one guy there, right? So you still don't fully know what you're doing. Like, I like David Andrews. I love Mike Onwenu. I think Sidy So's good on the inside. But it's not just left tackle either, KJ, right? Like, Okorafor at right tackle, he's played right tackle a lot, but we got to see how good he actually is there. Caden Wallace, I like, but he's a rookie. So, again, I just think that there's questions, especially at left tackle, but even a little bit at right tackle as well.
Here's what I find interesting. Who is the most worship and idolized player in the history of this franchise? Don't even say his name. What round was he in?
6th.
Okay, so how come every other 6th rounder is like, oh, yeah, this guy's not?
Yeah, but do we have to do this? And I'm not saying you personally, but I talked about this during the week with Mego. Like, just
wait a minute. Did you mention KJ and Lions when you were on Mego?
Oh, like 5 times, yeah.
Okay, good.
But just because Brady was a great player in the 6th round, people also now, every single time they have
Brock
a
Purdy?
day 3 draft pick play well, people equate him to be like, oh, he can have the career Brady. Like, no.
Brock
that's
Purdy?
But even Brock Purdy, he's a good player. Is he an elite, great player?
I'm not saying they have to be a Hall of Fame greatest of all time. I'm just saying,
we can't just say, oh, he had a good few minutes in the fourth quarter of a preseason game, and that means he's going to be good.
It's got to start somewhere, right?
I know it has to start somewhere, but people do this every year because Brady played here. People did it with Malik Cunningham last year, and then when Malik Cunningham went to the Ravens, everybody wanted to be excited.
And nobody was saying that Mac Jones was going up against third stringers. Nobody was screaming that. They were saying how good he looked.
No, I think you were saying he wasn't that good, actually, KJ.
No, I said he was a guy. I was saying, look, he was going against third stringers.
Yeah, so
but at the time, nobody was
saying
that.
You were.
No one. I said it, and I was right. But I'm saying,
so you were right.
If Joe Milton can show you a little bit more, and you know you've got a bad offensive line situation, you're going to need somebody who's going to move.
But what did Joe Milton really show us? Like, it was fun, and I think that's the headline, but he almost threw an interception on an out route. He had a scramble for 12 yards that was exciting, but he ran around a lot in the backfield, which probably isn't good in a regular season game if it came down to that. And then even the touchdown pass he threw, it was fun. It was a great touchdown. Ironically, he actually underthrew that ball a little. I mean, I know we're used to him throwing it 80 yards at a time, 100 miles an hour, but like it was fun. Don't get me wrong, it was fun, and I want him to make the team.
What is the worst thing a quarterback can do in the backfield? What is the worst thing he could do?
Turn his back, and that's what Joe Milton did on that scramble, by the way.
Or take a sack. If you've got an offensive line that's as porous as Swiss cheese, you've got to move. And if there are people, the two guys in front of you don't move, that may be a case. I hope it doesn't come to that. Look, we're up against the break.
Yep.
We'll get to your calls. KJ and Lions, 617-779-7937. Text line 37937. Lions Den next. Thank you so much for hanging out in WEEI.